Well, welcome to the Irish Baptist College podcast, Let's Talk. We're back with a few standalone episodes before a new series launches in 2025. I want to remind you that we have a full catalogue of podcasts to explore wherever you download your podcasts, so I encourage you to go there if you've missed any and catch up. And today's an exciting episode because we have a couple of firsts. So today we have our first association pastors joining us on the podcast. I was trying to decide which way we do this, alphabetical by first name or surname, so which is a different order, but we've Pastor Andrew Curry and Pastor Steve Auld with us, and this is the first time we've more than one guest being interviewed in the podcast as well. So the pressure is on. We aim for 25 minutes to half an hour with one guest, so we're going to try not to double it. Your only saving grace is that I once had Mervyn Scott on the podcast, so that was a long one all by himself, but it was good. So great to have you with us. Are you both well?
Yes, doing well, thank you.
Yep, also doing well.
We're recording this early in the week. Has the week been going okay so far since Sunday?
Yeah, I think so. Encouraging meeting with my assistant Simon this morning. Good. And our administrator, so it feels like I know what's happening for the rest of the week.
Excellent.
It's always better once you get past Monday, because Monday you kind of reflect on Sunday, and that's not always uplifting.
No.
But by Monday afternoon you get a few phone calls. There was a gentleman in the church had a fall yesterday, and that kind of brings you back down to reality, so you get into the normal routines, the pastoral care, and that's good. That gets you out of your own head.
The hamster wheel starts spinning again, doesn't it? Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We're going to think a little bit today about churches employing additional staff members, and particularly actually students at the college while they're studying with us. So we're going to explore that a little bit. But maybe before we do that, can you both introduce yourselves? So just family, church, brief testimony, maybe an interest, hobby, fun fact, if you have one. Wow. I don't know if you have one, but
there's a lot of things, but I'll try and...
Yeah, go for a brief introduction.
So, my name is Andrew Curry. I'm pastor in Emmanuel Baptist Church in the north side of Lisburn. My dad has been a pastor for a long time. Stephen Curry, he went and planted the church in Ballymoney. I was born about a year after that, so he went out with Baptist missions to Ballymoney and planted the church. And so at the beginning, whenever I was very small, it was in our living room, and then eventually moved in a porta cabin in the town hall, and then were able to get their own building in time. And I was really in that church until I was about 21, and then moved to with the family to Bangor. Dad was the pastor of Bethany for 10 years, and during that time then felt more and more the desire to train for ministry, and with the help of the elders there, I kind of made decisions and choices to facilitate that. So really, growing up in that little church plant, there was a lot of just really godly people that had come and tried to base themselves in that work, and Mum and Dad were very clear on the gospel and the need for me and my brothers to respond personally to the gospel. But it was largely the influence of all these others in the church that reinforced that message in Sunday school classes and children's meetings and everything else that really helped. And then as I got a little bit older, got involved with Baptist Youth, and would have gone in different little evangelism teams and things like that, especially, to Tom McLaughlin at the time was in Mullockmean. That's where I preached my first sermon. I didn't know I was preaching my first sermon until Sunday when Tom announced it. And Joe Flanagan was in Derry at the time, and he was a huge influence. I think he knew there could be difficulties being a pastor's kid, and so he was particularly kind to take me under his wing and give opportunity to test gift and things like that. That gave me a little bit more confidence to do things in Ballymoney itself.
Super, great, excellent.
Don't have any fun facts. Pretty boring, I guess. I need to think more carefully about that, but I will.
And family?
And I do have family, yes, absolutely.
Other than your dad?
Yeah, so I'm married to Sarah, and we have 3 kids. Isla, who just started secondary school, Ian, who's in P5, and Izzy is in P3, and we have our niece Brooklyn as well, who's been living with us, who's a little bit older, but we love having her with us as well.
Full household then?
It's all go.
Super, great. Thanks, Andrew.
Well, I'm Steve Auld, married to Lindsay. We have 3 children, Hudson, Elliot and Grace, who are 12, 11 and 8 years old. I have been serving as a pastor of Great Victoria Street Baptist Church for 7.5 years now. That has been just a wonderful time, like any ministry role, encouragements and challenges, but we have seen just a wonderful move of God in revitalisation and renewal at Great Vic. Super. And it has been so encouraging. So there have been challenges, but overwhelmingly encouragements, which is great. I came to know the Lord at a young age, brought up in a Christian family out in the countryside, so from a wee village in County Tyrone called Caledon. And it wasn't though until I was at university really where I think I understood what it was to kind of own that childhood profession and the faith that I'd been brought up with. And so I remember having a real deep experience of conviction in my late teens and really crying out to God to show me what it meant that Jesus came to give us life and life to the full. And that became this insatiable appetite to know what does that life to the full in Christ mean. So, and that has really been something that has opened doors for ministry in lots of different places, just that passion for life to the full in Christ. And so Lindsay and I served as missionaries in Madagascar. I did theological education in America. We served in Cambridge. I was assistant pastor at a church there, and then that's brought us to where we are now at Great Vic. Love all things sporty. Rugby has been a big part of my life my whole life. And more recently, now that I'm older and I can't play rugby, I've taken up triathlon. So I'm gonna give that as my kind of fun fact. I am a triathlete, believe it or not.
How fun is it?
Well, it's fun when you cross the finish line, I bet. And that's about the height of it.
Recovery.
So yeah.
Super. So you mentioned you pastor Great Vic, Steve. You've mentioned a little bit there about spiritual revival that you've kind of seen. Maybe just can you introduce the church to our listeners briefly, give us a flavour of what Great Vic is like?
Yeah, so we are a city centre church, all people from all ages and stages, gathering on a Sunday morning. We have anywhere between 170 to 200 people, probably 70 to 80 on a Sunday evening. I think we're about 140 members. That gives you a sense in terms of where we're at, just in terms of people who are in the building and who are members of our church. Some of our members have been there a long time, long-standing, faithful members. We have a great core of older members who are just like the steadiers of the ship.
For sure.
And then we've had a big growth in the past few years in 20s and 30s. And so that has left us sort of feeling sometimes like you got this older group and then at the bottom a sort of younger group, and in the middle there's Lindsay and me and our kids. But that's closing a bit as we're seeing some other young families coming along and getting involved. So all kinds of things happening at the church. Preaching, prayer, pastoral care, those are our priorities. And hopefully we're trying to do that well. Sometimes we'll do it well, sometimes we'll miss things. Super. But on the whole, we're focused on those priorities, especially leading through expository ministry of the word.
Great. And one of the big hopes for the immediate future or not too distant future, exciting new building project, just kind of, I was going to say just getting underway. I think that's been on the cards for a long time in Great Vic, but just kind of gathering momentum.
Pushing on now, we have, there's a long story involved in that, but we are essentially meeting in the halls at the back of our site that were never intended for the church to meet in. We've now completely outgrown that space, and we are trying to push forward with a vision to rebuild right there in the city centre with a building that would serve us on into the longer term future, and to really just establish Great Vic again right on that site in Belfast, so that we can just be a beacon of gospel light into the city for years to come.
Great. Well, if listeners are interested, they can go to Great Vic's social media channels,
they certainly can.
And they can
come and talk to me.
hear a little bit more about that. Emmanuel Baptist, I imagine some differences, some similarities. Just can you give us a flavour, Andrew? What is Emmanuel Baptist like?
It's actually very similar in terms of size and makeup. We would have about 118 members. We would have about 220 turn up on a Sunday morning, about 90 on Sunday evening, thereabouts. We probably have about 300 people we'll have across the door or contact with over the course of the week. The church has always been very evangelistic, and a lot of people have a real zeal to be reaching out, which has been good. And probably just the last while we've been trying to really grow in our discipleship and investing in training others. The church, it started in 1989, so it's really at that stage where we're now seeing another generation having to take ownership and leadership in different things within the church. And there were really good men and women at the very beginning who started and had that fervour and zeal. And in the course of my ministry, I've been there 9 years, we've had a lot of funerals where we've buried a number of those very faithful saints, and really having to look then to this next generation to come up. And before I went, there was 8 years where they didn't have a pastor, and 5 years they didn't have any eldership in the church. And so there was just a lot of just natural difficulties that lack of leadership brought, but God has been so kind. There was always faithful saints just holding the thing together. And over the last number of years, we've just seen, especially men, but men and women rising up who've responded to preaching and that investment and just responding to discipleship. And it's been really encouraging then to see them serve in different ways and to see some go out and serve in other places longer term.
Excellent. So one thing that both your churches do have in common is that you support church members who are studying at the college, at least current members at present time. So we'll stay with you, Andrew, if that's okay. What does that look like in Emmanuel at the minute? So what is there a title for the role? What's the job description kind of look like for the members who are presently studying at the college?
So I guess we almost think of it upside down. Okay. From what you're talking about, we don't necessarily think of supporting the students at the college, but we want to disciple all people in the church.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we're investing in them. And for certain men and women, there comes a point where very obviously the elders become convinced there's a call on their life to ministry, and college becomes a really helpful tool in shaping that. But it's still driven by the church. So the church is discipling and growing, and there comes a place where we can only do so much. And so getting to then send them actively to the college becomes like a privilege of the church that doesn't remove our responsibility.
Amen.
It's just an addition to it. So they can come and they can get taught, but it's still the primary discipleship has to be happening in the church context, which for us, if we know they're getting taught, more about scripture and theology and church history and all those things here at a place where we have confidence, then that allows us to then focus on practical ministry skills and wisdom and the development of character and all those things. And so we created, I guess, like an intern model that tries to encourage that and at the same time force the church in a right way to see that these people are not, all singing, all dancing workers for the church. These are individuals that we are, as a church, investing in for the sake of the kingdom at large. And that, it can be a hard thing to invest so much in somebody that you ultimately say goodbye to and send out.
For sure.
But it's been so sweet as a church because it creates a greater love for the kingdom at large. And so for us, it kind of goes through that way. So if there is like young men or women who we're discipling who want to further serve and are maybe thinking about, vocational ministry, we'll start to have conversations and start to give them more tasks within the church to do to test that gift. And then there comes an obvious point where college is going to be the best thing for them. And as I say, we keep working alongside them through that.
So you kind of have that internship model as a separate thing that kind of happens, and it might just be that people who are in that internship role then are studying with the college, and
it's almost as
part
if,
of that process.
Yeah, it's very individualistic.
Yeah,
You know, it's not like you come and you'll do exactly the same as the person before you.
For sure.
So there's some guys who come who are maybe very young, but we can see like the potential, who before they go to the college will give them, you know, certain tasks or an internship to do in the church that's about working out.
Yeah.
You know, are they in themselves dreaming, or is the gift really there? And the potential of development with a little bit more investment. So for some, that's what they need, and for others who are maybe a little further on and have made that big decision to come to the college, for them it's more about the skill set. How can we develop skills that the college, because of the nature of academic training, there's a practical side of that that only the church can do. So it's based more around that. And then for guys who finish college, then it's about, you know, taking them into a deeper you know, experience of that at times. Maybe they finish college, they've learned a lot, but there's still a little bit of polish that's needed before they could confidently step into another church and, you know, have all of the skill set and wisdom to be able to handle things. And just a little bit of an apprenticeship type of system gives them opportunity to, you know, do things, but with that soundboard to make sure they don't jump off the deep end. Yeah,
for sure. Great. Does it look similar in Great Vic, Steve, or is it a little bit different from that?
Certainly, the ethos sounds very, very similar. We're trying to grow in how we disciple believers at Great Vic, and we keep using this mantra. You know, we want to be disciples who make disciples who make disciples. And as you do that across the congregation, from time to time, people will emerge who have that gift set and sense of call internally, and as elders we're looking on and externally confirming that. And what that has meant for us is Paddy has gone along to the college. We see it that we are the primary trainers of Paddy for pastoral ministry. So a few years back I read a book by Kevin Van Hooser called The Pastor's Public Theologian, and he said that for years in the history of the church was seen as the incubator, the training institution for the next generation of pastors. But when we created this thing called the Bible College or the seminary, a mind shift took place, and people thought, oh, they're training for ministry, let's farm them out to the theological institution and they can train them. And that is a flawed way of thinking.
For sure.
Certainly the college or the seminary can focus and give skill sets that are so helpful in pastoral ministry, but still the primary training department is the local church. And so first of all, I think that attitude is important, that we all as elders have that. And that has meant we know that there are things that we can supply for these students who are training at the college that they can't get at the college. And the college can give time and effort to training them in things that we just don't have the time and effort to train them in. So for us, that means we've created a pastoral internship. That's what we call it. We try to focus on what are the particular gifts that this person could bring to an internship. And for Paddy, that was evangelism. So we've called it pastoral intern with a focus on evangelism. And that has meant giving Paddy experience, and any student, we would do something similar, giving them experience in leading services, in preaching, being involved in leading small groups, having regular feedback just on preaching, leading, things like that. We created a pastoral theology course, Great Vic PTC, which I think has worked to some degree. That was our own in-house, what does it mean to be a pastor? And then for me leading that as one in pastor ministry, I could just share live with Paddy and Jared and the other guys that are part of this. What it's like being a pastor, but also what are the convictions internally that should drive us. What is a pastor? That was our first session. So there's a mix of formal ministry stuff that our interns would do, and then just that informal life on life stuff where I try to let them see a little into the life of pastoral ministry.
Great, that's excellent. And it's so encouraging to listen to two pastors and two churches that want to do that and want to provide that. You know, you guys have both been through seminary. You can only learn so much in a classroom, and And things are very black and white in the classroom as well until you're sitting in the living room with someone talking about these issues. So it's great to have that exposure, real life exposure outside of the classroom, which is super. Now, part of having this conversation is to encourage other pastors and churches to think, can we provide something similar? How do we do that? It's been helpful to hear you shape rules around individuals and what their gifting and interest is and that kind of thing. But the big question is always funding. How do you make this work as a church? And both kind of good sized churches, but not huge churches by any stretch of the imagination. So how financially do you make that work without being improper and asking that? But do you fund it internally, externally? Is that something the members then commit to supporting? How does the funding work for you guys?
So I think it starts with the mindset. So kind of what Steve was saying before, like it's the church's responsibility. So it becomes a stewardship. So it should be the priority in a lot of on the agenda of an elders meeting. Like we are talking about how do we foster gifting, but not just in terms of men going to train for ministry, but across the whole church, this discipleship. And without that, we're not doing our job well of training and investing and developing. So it has to start with that mindset shift. And that means that there may be times whenever we don't update the sound system because we recognise there's a greater responsibility to invest in the kingdom to send out. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a time to put money into the sound system, but it's to say that there's a way more explicit command for us to be disciplers in Scripture than there is for us to have, an efficiently run, well-managed facility. So there is a place for that, but there's a bigger place for that stewardship. And I think as a church, like I would say in Emmanuel, it was a big struggle at the beginning to kind of see that there was this investment because there's not an immediate return. There is good that interns bring to the church, but it's a growing good because they're developing in the role. So at the beginning, every task takes far longer. And a lot of the times they can drop the ball on those tasks, but that's the only way you learn. You learn through doing. And so if the whole church can start to be prayerful about this and to see it as our primary responsibility, I think that mindset shift is the biggest thing, because after that money comes. So there are different grants and funds that sometimes you can apply for. There are different people suddenly are moved to give to something like this. None of it is ever guaranteed. So we have never really been sure where the money's coming from. And in Emmanuel, they're sweet people, but the majority of them are probably in their 20s and 30s, and there's not a lot of expendable income either. So we've never been a church with a very fat budget. We don't have a lot of finances, but as we've moved forward to steward that gift, God has always provided. Now, it's always been close to the line, but always provided so that we can do it. And I think, if we can see whatever we do give to these individuals that are going through as our responsibility to free them up, same way we do with a pastor, to free them up, to grow and to develop and to sharpen gift so that the kingdom is blessed by that. I think it's a wonderful thing. And God really does bless churches that are kingdom minded. And they may not, see the benefit of so-and-so in the church long term, because ultimately we're going to send them out.
Else.
But it's an amazing thing that takes place in the heart of the church whenever they're deliberately stewarding gift and putting money and investment there to bless the kingdom at large.
Excellent. And for all those AV technicians, we'll give you Andrew's email at the end, and you can write to him and complain about it.
And if they want some investment,
what about the model for Great Vic, Steve, and making that work?
I think it starts with the person first of all, or the people, and just the commitment. Right, we want to be involved here in training for ministry, so that could be bringing that to the congregation, could be outlining a budget for it, and then finding the finances within ourselves. For us, we've also got some healthy partnerships with some other churches who would have a bigger budget than we would have. And for for our current internship, we receive support financially externally from a church that has partnered with us. Great. And seen gifting in Paddy and just thought we want to invest in that. And so that's been just a real help to us, finding those external means of support as well. So some from within, some from without. And when people see the gifting, the calling, see the growth, as Andrew said, there may not be that initial sort of sense of gaining from this, but the more you see a person growing and maturing and you think, wow, we are seeing an emerging pastor. This is really exciting that we're investing in this. And you're investing in a ministry that could perhaps last for another 30 years, blessing the church.
For sure.
So,
sure.
Like I remember Joe Flanagan telling me about his first sermon, and it's a great. If anybody has never heard Joe Flanagan's story about his first sermon, you got to call him and ask him about it, because the way he describes it, he's a good illustrator, and so there's a lot of colour in that story. But basically, it was a train wreck, but it was needed to be able to let him get to a place where he preached his second sermon, and then third and fourth, and that's the way this works. Like, nobody appears with an amazing sermon the first time and is the finished article that we send out. And I think too often as churches, even whenever they see the benefit of maybe an assistantship or internship, they kind of think of a job description and then let's try and find the funding and everything else, and we'll try and find somebody to slot in there. That's upside down. You've got to look at your people and look at the gifts that are there and start with deliberate investment in that. And then, the funds and all the other things that are important, you work that out afterwards as an afterthought. But you have to start looking at the people in your church and thinking, how do we move them forward?
So we need a church that are thinking initially about discipling one another and discipling. We had Liam Garvey at the beginning of this year talking about training all, but training some. So you have that mindset. You then see people who maybe we should be investing a little bit more time in, and then that leads to hopefully the commitment to put money in to support that. And
there should be no elder in one of our Irish Baptist churches that if you ask them couldn't tell you 2 or 3 people they're actively praying for that God would grow in ministry, whether internal or whether to be to send out long term. They should know those people. That should be such a essential part of how we think as elders.
Okay, great. You've both alluded to this a little bit, I think. I'm gonna merge 2 questions together here. So some benefits to this. Can you outline a little bit of the benefit to the church? Because sometimes if people are fresh, a little bit green behind the ears, the benefit to the church isn't always immediately apparent. So how does that benefit the church and maybe the individual as well who's in that role? And then what are the challenges? And I'm thinking maybe particularly for you guys, pastors listening, I've got 2 sermons to prepare a week. I've got this list of people I need to visit. I've got these meetings I need to be at. Trying to bring someone else on board that I've got to invest time in, how do I fit that? So what's the challenge for you guys and how do you manage that? So benefits and challenges to this kind of role in your church.
Yeah, benefits. As I said earlier, just it's seeing pastors emerging or ministry leaders in appropriate roles, just seeing the emerging of someone. It's almost like you get to see in a situation like this, not just someone's gifts growing, but you see progressive sanctification actually happening. You see it, not just in the pastor, but in the intern. You see growth, you see character maturity, you see growth in Christ-likeness. All of the things which first make the man or make the woman, it's character. So I think the benefit is seeing the growth and maturity of someone who starts off maybe with a few more rough edges than one might want, and then you see them just maturing and growing in a role, and it's just absolutely wonderful. It's a privilege. And I think that means we must not be afraid as pastors to give ministry opportunities to people. And you might be a bit like, oh, hold on to your hats here, I don't know what's coming. Now obviously we need to guard our pulpits, we need to be wise, etc., etc. But I think we need to be able to create ministry opportunities for people. I was given opportunities to preach when I was younger, and I think back to my first sermons and I cringe, but people gave me the opportunity to do that, and that was how I grew and matured. And so I think there's great benefit in just creating the spaces to see someone grow and emerge. I have these visions of like a wee chick that becomes a chicken. I know that's not the greatest in the world, but you know what I mean? Like someone emerging through stages of growth in front of you. We've seen that at Great Vic, and it has been immensely encouraging for us. I think the challenges then come with just that busy schedule, and you want to do better. I look at what we're doing and I'm like, we could do this better, we could do this better, we could do this better. We're trying some things. Some of them are working, some of them are not. Sometimes life gets so full that it kind of falls by the wayside, maybe the intentional way I want to invest. But that's okay. Just keep trying and plugging away at it. That's what I would say. And it doesn't have to be huge, like, it's not like all day long every day. I have my scheduled meetings that are in place, sermon feedback discussions, things like that. When we were doing pastoral theology, it was once every 2 weeks, 2 hours in my study, and we just discussed lots of different things to do with ministry. So you can set it up and organise it that it's not. It's not.
So what is your time investment on an average week? I know there's no such thing as an average week in pastoral ministry, but you know what?
It is totally different every week, but it is more like a fairly regular, at one stage it was every 2 weeks, there was a solid meeting in place. Now it's more just a fairly regular checking in to meet, to discuss ministry things, to discuss just growth and personal life.
A little bit more organic now rather than scheduled.
Yeah.
That's useful. What about Emmanuel, Andrews?
So in terms of advantages, it's self-generating. So we've had 12 people go through some form of this type of situation, and 9 of them are in full-time ministry now.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Well, or in the process of finishing studies to be in full-time ministry, but that's very strongly their aspiration. But 9 of them, which is huge, but it didn't happen like, when day one when we suddenly decided. Day one we started with one person who was kind of wrestling with, I wonder, and he was me and him would meet weekly for coffee. He had requested that, and at the beginning in the pastoral work in Emmanuel, I was so glad somebody would talk to me. So it was just, for me, it was a real relief. And actually, he's a faithful member of our church now, but he hasn't ended up in full-time ministry yet. I think that might come in time, but that was such a helpful thing, and it created a platform where the church started to see growth, and then other younger men and women in the church started to see that is possible to grow. And it kind of one spurs on another, and then there's a couple of guys who during COVID, both of them are actually studying at the college now, both of them in COVID started going through Joshua with Dale Ralph Davis commentaries and Judges and all these other things, and they wanted to do Christianity Explored courses online and all these other things, and they just really spurred one another on, and that tends to be what happens. You start with one, but it very quickly people encourage each other. So it's wonderful, and it's had a healthy effect, I think, on the rest of the church. And then because we've had all these different people go out into different churches and different parts of the world for ministry, we naturally pray more for the world because we know the people in the world,
in different places,
and that's been really good. And the moment we've another little church in County Kildare where we're sending men down every week to preach, and I don't think we could have done that a few years ago. It's because there's now a mindset in the church that's a normal thing. I would say the challenge is that doesn't happen overnight. There's a sense in most churches where we think as consumers to begin with. And so we imagine if we're putting in investment, we should be getting return. And that does happen, but it doesn't happen like in the immediate, and actually it's not even the reason we do it. No. We do it because God has called us to discipleship and to this stewardship. And so that kind of has to be the thing that drives us. So I think churches can be sometimes unintentionally greedy with their pastors. There's something very flattering, and they always like to listen to me, and they want me to visit, and all of that. That can be flattering, but it can also be a prison that you live within, because ultimately somebody else may have to speak at a midweek for them to have opportunity to grow, and somebody else might have to visit with one of the other elders to gain experience in that. And as a church, the whole mindset has to shift to, we want this to be what we do, and we're willing to give our pastor time to that. That training others, especially training men, is his time well spent. So we utilize others in the church. It's not me that does all of that. Elders maybe will take somebody visiting with them, or they'll meet up and talk about character and how relationship with wife or other things are going. Like we're really thankful that our men in eldership, they're doing that. But I will meet it happens to be at the moment, it's a Wednesday because that's what suits the guys. Every Wednesday we meet, and for about 2 hours, sometimes we'll have a little bit of reading that we'll talk through. Most times we'll start with scenarios that have happened in ministry and try and flesh that out, or say a funeral's coming up or a baptismal's coming up or something like that. We'll flesh out the to-dos with that and how that works and how do I think about it, and where have I put my foot in my mouth and done things wrong. And so we'll work through what's organically coming up in ministry, but every week for 2 hours we'll kind of give to that. Again, most of the church don't necessarily get the benefit of that meeting. They definitely don't, but they long term see the benefit in the impact these guys, and they believe in it now.
Great. Really exciting to listen. I think especially that kind of front row seat on sanctification, growth, development in gifting and talents. Big payoff. By investing in someone, you get to see that, and that's a huge encouragement.
Can I maybe add one more thing?
Go for it.
Because I think the more you're involved in training the next generation of pastors, the more you think carefully about what a pastor is yourself.
And what you're looking for.
Absolutely important that we as pastors, if we were asked the question, what is a pastor? You have an answer to that question. Because you can just assume, we all know what a pastor is, but everyone across our congregation, they all have maybe a different idea of what they think we should be doing as a pastor every week. And so if you don't have your clear pastoral theology kind of nailed down as to this is what I should do, you'll just be blown around everywhere. And then the more you're investing in the next generation, you're not just sort of teaching how to preach and how to visit. You're teaching them on godly character, and then the priorities of pastoral ministry that are preaching, prayer, pastoral care. You're teaching them to keep a watch on themselves and on the flock. So I think the more you're invested in this, the more it makes you think about your own life as a pastor, and then not just drifting aimlessly as we react to what everyone wants us to do, but we're actually charting a clear course based on biblical convictions for the good of the church.
Great. And that clarity of thinking doesn't come unless you give time to that.
It makes you think more.
Helps, definitely. What if there's pastors or church leaders or members of churches listening, and they're thinking, this sounds great, we'd love to see something like this in our church? What kind of words of advice or counsel might you give to them in terms of, so nothing like this exists in their church, where do you move to, or how do you initiate some kind of conversation or thinking about the possibility of something like this in a local church?
So it has to start with, I know I sound like a broken record, it has to start with the elders thinking about stewardship. So I would very simply make it a point of prayer in the elders meeting. Lord, help us to see whose gift and ability we should be investing in, and start there with purposefully praying that way and actively talking in the eldership. Sometimes it's only when you start saying names out loud that you start to see all the blessed gifting that God has given to the church in the people, and that needs to be fanned and invested in. So I think you have to make that an active part of what you talk about, rather than to think through funding and jobs and all this sort of stuff first. Start with the people that you have, because the Lord, He builds the church, and that will come, and normally it requires just the eldership to be active in pursuing that. So I would say that first is key, to be praying and to be actually talking about names out loud as elders before you even get to them. And then within the calendar of a church, to be thinking about, again, not college necessarily at this stage, but opportunities for gift to be tested.
Yeah.
So like, you know the way most Julys in our churches, like the midweek is, you know, small in numbers or up and down. It's really inconsistent. Well, why not use July and August to do a little midweek sermon series, go through the Beatitudes, and different men in the church are given an opportunity to sign up to do that. If nothing happens from it, at least they'll be really sympathetic to the preacher every Sunday because they've had to do it themselves and realise it doesn't just happen. And for some, they'll develop gift and ability to do that, to gain confidence and to start to ask questions that they would never have asked otherwise. If you don't give people opportunity, it'll never happen. And I think most of our churches, we tend to think that the opportunity comes through children's work or youth work. And for people who like children and teenagers, that's great because they will test gift and do that. But if you don't like children, like if you're not naturally somebody who connects with children, all you ever talk to is adults, and that tends to be what it is for a lot of men especially, then that's really hard. So you've got to think about opportunity that beyond children's and youth work that people can engage in within the life of the church to test gift.
Super, great.
Yeah, I think for me it's just been sort of ministering away. I'm just preaching and pastoring and trying to care for the church, and then up arises certain people and they might say, could I just talk? I've got this sense of maybe, you know, doing something ministry related, or I was thinking I'd love to go to college or something like that. And then it's just getting all over that. It's just, okay, let's sit down, let's talk about it. And then I literally just pour on them my passion for pastoral ministry and local church ministry, and my conviction that the tone of a church is so often shaped by the tone that is amongst the eldership, and how we need to be invested in the next generation. You know, who are going to be the pastors of my kids? Who are going to be the healthy churches in the future that are reaching out? Because even a country like Northern Ireland, where there is, praise the Lord, good, healthy churches, it just takes one generation of presuming the gospel to see the church is weakened. And so who's going to keep the next generation strong? And that's what drives you, I think, to then get alongside and say, right, I am going to invest so that the next generation of churches in Northern Ireland will be strong, be led by strong elders. So I think you just do your ministry, and when you see someone who's emerging, showing an interest, showing gifts, showing maybe a sense of calling, that you take it really seriously and you just throw everything into investing and pouring into them.
And not be scared of risk. You know, not everybody you invest in, you get immediate. Like sometimes it can be heartbreaking because you invest in somebody, and we see this in church anyway. You know, people walk away from the Lord, or you know, they get caught in sin. But you know, that's life and ministry and the reality of the church. You know, Paul will have a Demas who forsakes for the things of this world, but he'll have a Timothy who he fans that flame, and it makes all the difference for Ephesus. So we've got to be aware that there is a risk to all this. You can't make it risk-free. But that's how this people ministry works. You invest, and the Lord is the one who brings the growth. Like He blesses. The Holy Spirit works through this. That's why there's not like a logical system. If I put A, B, and C, this is going to be the output. It's the Lord works, and again, that's the idea of stewardship. Let's just be faithful with the resources we see in front of our face, the people, as Steve said, who are coming forward, pour it all into them, and the results, that's the Lord's work, and we have to leave that with Him.
And it's striking that you mentioned Paul and Timothy, because I've just opened 2 Timothy. This is what Paul was pouring into Timothy. What you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. So there's Paul doing it with Timothy. And then he's saying, Timothy, make sure this is part of your culture, that what you've learned, you pass it on to others, and then they're going to be able to teach others. So there's, in a sense, your scriptural anchor for the conviction that we have in taking seriously training the next generation. It's not just something we're passionate about, and that's like a unique thing to us as pastors. No, this is in the Bible, and this should be a culture where we're all working towards.
For all Christians in the church. Yeah, excellent. Well, gents, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you giving it up. I've got one more bonus question that you've no idea I'm going to ask, but I'm going to throw it in anyway.
Love a good bonus question.
So you guys have both said, you're local church pastors. You're passionate about local church. You're convinced that's where discipleship begins and is initiated, and where pastors are made, for want of a better term, largely.
I'd want to put family into that as well.
And family.
As in your family is a key place of discipleship?
For sure.
Family of the church, etc. Yeah, okay.
But you're both involved in the Irish Baptist College. So you sacrifice time to be here teaching. So you're teaching later today, Steve. You were teaching last week. You do evening class for us as well, Andrew. So you take time to come in and to teach the Irish Baptist College. Why do you do that? And to make clear, you've both alluded to this as well. So you studied a master's, Andrew. You studied Trinity. So you studied elsewhere, which is fine. I don't hold that against you guys. But and there's lots of good options out there. So why invest your time here, in terms of teaching?
Because this is the most local college that, philosophically, our church and personally, I align with. And so if we're going to have a local impact, college has a role to play in that. And so I want to, where I can be a help and an encouragement, just come alongside and to be part of that, because local impact is going to be most felt by a faithful local college. And I'm so grateful that we do have the Irish Baptist College, and I want to see it flourish. Deliberately, it's not every single person that comes through, the Irish Baptist College is the best choice for them.
For sure.
But the majority of people who are local, that's going to be the best choice for them. And as an eldership, it's more natural, because it lets us also partner in that ministry and ongoing investment. These are our people. And so the idea of being able to have something local that we can send our people who we are caring for, praying for, and know that the training they're going to get is trustworthy, that's a really special thing we should be so thankful for.
Great.
Yeah, I've seen the benefits of theological education throughout my life. I've received so much and been blessed myself in being trained, and just have a passion for good training in a local institution. So here at IBC, I would just long to see students coming, being trained with the best theological education they can be trained with, and so that a future generation of leaders will come out not just with competency but with character.
Amen.
That the godly men and women would be there investing in our churches down through the years for the sake of this generation and the next generation. So for me, I'm just like, get me in front of any students who will be future pastors, because I am really excited to be able to share the privilege, the challenge, the opportunities, and the convictions that drive us in ministry. I just love to see students and think, 10 students in the room, they could be 10 pastors of 10 local churches, and I get to put something into them that then will bless others. That's just a great privilege I've received, and so what a joy to be able to share something with them.
Super. Well, we're so grateful for both of you in terms of your input into college life, and not just in your teaching, sending students from your churches, and your churches being faithful supporters of the college as well. So thank you guys. Thanks for your time. And thank you listeners for your time as well. And we would encourage you just to join us, continuing to pray for, to support, and to long for the raising up of a new generation of pastors, missionaries, evangelists, and other gospel workers at the college. And if you visit the college website, you can find out how to support us there.